reading skills.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm really happy to be participating in the conference as a speaker for the first time. My name is Manoel, and I am one of the senior teachers here at IH Coimbra in central Portugal. And I'm going to talk about reading skills, which is something I love, that I've investigated quite a bit recently for my Delta and also in my classes. So I decided to delve into this a bit more because it's a shame that some people believe that reading is some sort of an uncool, unsexy skill to be worked with. And some teachers opt for assigning reading tasks for homework. And then the students do it and they bring the answers to class and they check answers and everyone's happy and that's it. As a non-native speaker of the language, I find that somewhat offensive because I can definitely see, having learned the language from scratch in a non-English speaking country, I can definitely see the importance of receptive skills, reading and listening, because to my mind, it sort of aids your gut feeling. So that feeling of I've seen it before, when you hear or identify some collocation or a piece of vocab. And also because reading is very active, reading is not passive at all. So hopefully this is what I'm going to be able to show you for the next few minutes. So when I prepare in reading tasks, I sort of have these three principles in mind. Noticing, because the students obviously need to be able to identify what they're working with and relate it to their knowledge of the world, etc. Raising awareness, and I'm talking from a sub-skills point of view, for example, metacognition, like having the students reflect on their skills, sort of higher order skills. And finally, last but not least, activating, so making that clear. So this is what we are working with. And usually this happens through speaking most of the times with me. So I'm gonna lead you through a bunch of examples. So firstly, this is something I had to prep once when I was working in summer school, and I was told to prep an excursion lesson for Canterbury. And you know, a lot of people say, oh, summer school, you can't do any reading, you can only do speaking, a bit of listening, a bit of vocab. But I thought it would be interesting for them to know a little bit about this town before going there. So how can we do this? So firstly, questions. But obviously, if I gave them the text and say, answer these questions, that would be quite boring, right? Because we're talking to teenagers. So let's do something to make this a bit more interesting. I want to focus on two questions. So maybe you guys can type your answers into the chat box. Who was Archbishop of Canterbury at the time? And then you need 2 words. And how did he die? So those 2 questions. So who was Archbishop of Canterbury and how did he die? And I'm going to show you a word cloud. Can you see if you can find your answers there? Jeffrey Beckett, oh, hi Louise. First, Louise is a dear friend of mine from the Basque Country. Shout out to you. Jeffrey Beckett's a good try. It's 2 names, that's it. It was Thomas Becket, Lucy, that's right. And how did he die, you think? Exactly, he was murdered. And then obviously, like the students look at the cloud, they discuss the questions, and you can have functional language in between. And then after that, they are a bit more inclined to go on and read the text. So let's do proper scanning. And then you would say, okay, now look at the text. It's a short text. And check your answers, find your answers. And then the answers for the previous activity were here. So this was a really nice way to show a principle. You are working with the skill of scanning, but it's all in a different way. Right, moving on to another one that also involves word clouds. I was thinking about gap-filled texts, and it's something that becomes quite a big thing when it comes to exam preparation. For instance, students need to tackle that open-close task. And then why do we do fill in the gaps? It's just because we want the students to see the language in context and in code text, and to be able to notice and record collocations. But once again, if you just give the students the text like this, and you say complete it, it's gonna be a bit boring and a bit not very challenging, not very involving. So this is something I got. I haven't made this. I got it from Breaking News English, because the week before this was an advanced level class. We worked with a text about the words of the year, and then I was looking into other things, and then because they like talking about this, and then I just said, okay, firstly, just normally forget about the gaps, focus on the rest, and then tell me what omnishambles is and which other words that made the top 10 list you can find. So they did that, and then after that, instead of saying, okay, complete, so we went through one example, which was the first one. So, for example, the word that they needed to fill in the gap was neologism, because that means new word. And then, first of all, I told them to predict what sort of words would they expect to see. And then they did that for a couple of minutes. Let's try with you guys again. In the chat box, can you type what you think possible answers could be for numbers 2 and 3, please? Okay, recent, yeah. Okay, new and series, yeah. A series of blunders, okay, Luis, yeah. So, yeah, then obviously you would promote the whole discussion about what's a part of speech, etc., which I think it's what you normally do. However, to make this a bit more challenging, and I'm doing this on the interactive whiteboard, so I can go back and forth with the slides. I showed them another cloud, and then I said, okay, now you're going to see the answers here, but there will be a series of red herrings. So you need to be able to look at the text and the choices you have and come to a conclusion. So I'm going to do the same thing with you now. So tell me what you think the answers I have here would be, and see if you want to change any of them. But there are red herrings. There are things that look right, but they're not right. Exactly, Lisa was right. Yeah. And now, of course, by now, exactly, Lucy. By now, the students have realized they haven't got the word series there, so they need to force themselves to think of something else which is similar, and that would go there as well. So in this case, string. Um, and then obviously, the students, as we were on the interactive whiteboard, they were going back and forth from the text to the choices. And you can do it as a game. They can do it together, like in two groups or etc. And see who can get the most words correctly. And you can also talk about other possibilities, because one of the answers for the other paragraph was stand the test of time. And then on purpose, I included other answers that are also correct, which stand the test of time, or even pass the test of time, which is not very used, but still correct. And then you can see they were really engaged in trying to find what the correct word is. And also, you can also discuss other possibilities that were not there. So in the text before, you had omnishambles is characterized by so the answer was a state of total disorder. And then instead of disorder, someone said disarray. So yeah, that's pretty good. Like, it also works. So you can talk about the different possibilities. And at the same time, they are getting focused on what could go with those words, what couldn't, and the difference between those words that are quite tricky because they are very similar, like abbreviation and acronym, collapse and disorder, etc. And also getting a sense of parts of speech and whatnot. So, as I said, they develop their ability to retain information. They're able to monitor their comprehension as they're going back and forth between the slides, to like racking their brains to find the correct answer. They have an opportunity to be active and reflect on meaning, but also morphology and syntax. And they get a sense of achievement because it was a really challenging task. So that's what you want the students to feel once they get to a certain level, for example, advanced. Sneaky skimming. So you start with a blur, and I did this on Active Inspire. Then it was close to Valentine's Day, so why not? Let's draw some hearts. And what do you think this text could be about? I'm gonna go slowly through the slides now, but if you have any ideas, you feel free to type in the chat box again. Earthquakes, volcanoes, geology, yeah. I think you are definitely going the right track. I'll let you see a bit more. Let's draw some arrows now through the hearts and happy face as well. Not for those that are single, of course, but for those who can celebrate Valentine's Day. Did you change your mind? Do you still think it's about, can you say something a bit more specific? I'll show you a bit more. Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, Liz. Okay, I'm gonna show you a bit more, and this is gonna give it away. If you look at the end of the first paragraph, Lucy's typing and Lisa as well. Exactly. So it was that recent conversation about the extinction of dinosaurs being due not just to what we normally knew, but also some sort of volcanic activity. Then you have your show reveal wise. Why should I do this? Because I don't want them to read the whole text. So that's how skimming works. You're looking at the general idea, but not really going into the particulars, and then showing them a little bit more. And then once they have the whole text, you can go ahead and work with something like, you can see some words here are in bold. Then you can go ahead and work with deducing meaning. So what's the part of speech, meaning, and what clues can they use? Because this is something I find even students that are really good sometimes struggle doing. Like when they need to work out the meaning of a certain word, they don't have the skills to do that, so they fail to look at morphology, look at what's around the text, look at the bigger context, what's happening, right? And this is one of my big problems with English file, but that's not the time to talk about this. So, because some words, for example, notorious, are false friends with Portuguese and Spanish, because notorious in Portuguese is primarily a positive word, whereas in English is mostly negative. So that's something you need to get students to be able to notice by themselves. And this is another variation that you might have done as well. So having the topic sentence and the end of the paragraph, in the middle blurred, and then ask them what you think would go in the middle. So what does deducing meaning from context show us about the nature of reading? So following on from what I've told you before on working with part of speech and clues to help you work out the meaning of a word if you need to do so, you find that the skills that the students have in L1 are sometimes not immediately transferable into English or into the foreign language they're learning, especially if they don't read very much, or all they come across is memes, for example. I love memes, I do lessons with memes, but to be able to tackle Cambridge exams or something more difficult, they need to be able to get to grips with higher order stuff. So this demands practice, awareness, and a lot of work. So for example, I got this from the book from Reading Teacher, and it's, for example, we've got the word prevalent. That word would be easily identifiable for a Romance language speaker because it's a cognate, so that would be pretty easy. However, if you move on to things like this here, demise and herald, it gets a bit tricky because, and this happened when I was working in the Basque Country and preparing first certificate students for the exam. And the student said, oh, okay, so use and I said, use the code text, use what's around the words to help you deduce the meaning. And then she went like, but I don't really know, I don't understand anything because I don't know what contributed means. And then I was quite shocked, and it was like, and then that got me thinking, and that prevented her from even trying the rest of the sentence. Why do you think she had this problem? Why do you think she didn't understand what contributed meant? Louise might know the answer to this. I'm not saying it's just one cause, but this is how I saw it at the time, because I needed to do some there and then teaching. Not really, Lucy. Exactly, Luis. That's it. So I used to live in the countryside, so the students' mother tongue's Basque. They hardly ever spoke Spanish, and this particular student had a very poor control of Spanish. She only spoke Basque at home, so that's the reason why she gave up. But then I was like, okay, let's look at this in a different way. So let's start from the second sentence. So do you understand anything? I said, I understand technological revolution and I understand social changes. Okay. Okay, let's look back at the first one. You've got industrial revolution. Oh, so industrial revolution, technological revolution. And then in the middle, you kind of have the word likewise. So that's pointing out for the same thing. Okay, right? So keep that in mind. Go back to the first one. Feudal lords and the bourgeoisie. What do you know about these people? Is there any other words you know? Okay, forget about contributor. You don't know that. But, I actually know rise. Okay, rise means going up, increasing. So maybe the other one is the opposite. It's loss of power. Oh, yeah, that's right. So the revolution contributed to this and that. And likewise, the technological revolution may herald changes in the future. So that's parallelism. That's the same idea running through both sentences. So after doing this and seeing the alternatives, she was able to give me the right answer, but she got there actually even before I showed her ABC. So what does this show us about the nature of reading that students should pay attention to? It's that reading is non-linear. And it doesn't mean that sometimes you have to go back and forth. I think it's from the Cambridge Handbook that there's a part 4, and they're talking about beasts. Part 7. And I'm reading through the first paragraph, and I want to know what these beasts are. And then later I found out they were like foxes or something. Do you know when the reference to that came up? It was nearly the end of the second paragraph. So you spend you reading through a number of lines, seeing absolutely no reference, and the reference came up much, much later. So if the students read linearly, they're not going to get there. They're not going to identify the reference. So you need to be able to show them that you go back and forth when you are reading, that this is a very active process that you need to engage. And mostly in this situation, of course, you should be able to know most of the words in a certain paragraph to be able to make sense of it. But the fact that she didn't know contributed, which was the main verb in that sentence, put her off. And then what do? Like, you just gave up? No, you need to be able to look at the things you already know and not the opposite. I think a colleague of mine was telling me a story the other day. There was teaching exam preparation as well. And she was like, the student said, the teacher asked, how did you go about tackling the task? Or what did you do? And then she was like, I underlined all the words I didn't know in the first paragraph. And it turns out it was something like 12 words. Hey, how motivating is that? Like, there is the very first paragraph of the text and you don't know half of it. So that's not going to help you. So you need to focus. If you need students to be able to deduce the meaning of something, focus on what they already know and work from there, instead of focusing on a lot of things they do. If they don't know one or two things, that's fine. You pre-teach, get through, fine. But if they don't know half of the paragraph, nevertheless, how how can you help them? What can you do? So this is the big question that they need to be made aware of, and it's a skill, and this needs to be practiced and reinforced in class, right? I'm running out of time, so just quickly showing you something I've done for the gapped text, which is the beast of Cambridge exams. You're gonna find, I'm gonna give you a link that you're gonna be able to see more information about this, but I had students look at the different kinds of references and using different shapes and colors. So every time that they found a pronoun reference or a demonstrative, they would circle using a red biro, for instance, and marking the line in which they found that. So in this case, this and line 11. If they found words, linking words and cohesive devices like however and but, yet, etc., they could use a green biro and a rectangle to mark that. And if they found any lexical reference, which is the hardest to identify, they could underline or use brackets, for instance. And then, obviously, this is the teacher analysis. The students doesn't need to look like this, but this is a way of showing how they can mark the reference, because obviously when your eyes move from the sentences or from the paragraphs to the text, if you don't mark the reference, you're going to forget what the pronoun or the linking word referred to. And by having them trained in marking this very consistently using different shapes, they will get a sense of what's involved and look at the links, look at the false links, the distractors and whatnot. And this is the actual test, the actual exam task. So that was basically what I wanted to share with you guys. I recently started a blog. This is something I've been putting off for a long time, and the conference kind of served as a motivation for me to finally start doing this. So if you want to keep up the conversation with me and about these topics about reception skills, you feel free to email me. There's also the link to the blog, now the recently started blog. It's a bit broad, still needs development, but the very first post is about this task that I just showed you. So if you're interested in learning more, just go there and comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know if it worked with your students. And thanks very much.
A great conference. I hope to see you next year's with some more, bringing some more insights for us. So thank you very much for now. The purpose of the session, so close to the next session starts. So I have to take Manuel straight off camera video, but he'll probably be in the chat box for a moment at least, and you've got his email address there if you want to continue the conversation with him. Lisa, are you there?